Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
and we are back again today with episode 130 of Podcast 2 for 1. Yes, 130. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That way, you're up to date on all future episodes of Podcast 2 for 1, as well as the cool content we have at 2 for 1 Studios, youtube.com/2 for 1 Studios, the best place to consume the content. And of course, if you did not know, and boy oh boy, I bet you did not, we are sponsored by Kapow Comics, located at 4047 East Kill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas, that they have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course, special guest appearances throughout the year. Kapow. Daniel, it is episode 130 of Podcast 2 for 1, like I just said, and we are reviewing episode 1 of She-Hulk.
Indeed, we are.
We are. You have not watched episode 2 yet?
I have not. Had a
Gotcha.
chance.
Okay. It's good because I mean it's easy to talk about episode 1 and not episode 2. Not in a bad way, but one thing, we had D23 a couple years ago now, I believe, and this was one of the things that was announced, and it was like, okay, like we're starting to get into some of these secondary legacy characters, and characters that are like similar to our core cast, but it's like a pass of the baton kind of situation, or it's
Right.
like you have Spider-Man, you have Miles Morales, you have Iron Man, I think you have War Machine, some would say argue Ironheart, which we are getting, unfortunately, and then we have Hulk, and then we have She-Hulk. So
Yes.
I've always been a fan of Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk. She's an attorney. She's always, it was always a fun concept, right? Of like this attorney representing superhero people. So I was like, yeah, I'm down for this. And I was always like, yeah, let's watch this show. So here we are, X amount of years later since the announcement. We're in episode 1, and there's been some hype built up because some of these previews we know that Wong's going to be in it at some point. We know that Daredevil is going to be in it at some point, which is obviously probably my biggest sticking point.
Oh yeah.
For obvious reasons. And then we obviously knew that Hulk was going to be in it too, which is cool because we haven't gotten that much Hulk in the MCU compared to some of the other characters. And what's your initial reactions of episode 1 of She-Hulk?
I thought it was good. I thought it was clunky in a couple parts, just in the ways that I feel like is kind of a trend with Marvel shows. I feel like sometimes the first episode a lot of times feels clunky, just trying to set all the pieces in place. So it felt a little bit maybe just like there was just a lot of montages and a lot of, flash. I mean, the whole episode was a flashback. And so it just felt a little bit like, I don't know, that it just felt a little bit clunky in those areas. But at the same time, I felt like that it was really succeeding at doing what it was trying to do. It kind of has this lighter tone to it. It's fourth wall breaking, which I didn't know about. I knew about it before I watched it. Recently, I found out like she's like Deadpool basically.
Right.
Like she's kind of constantly breaking the fourth wall, and that's interesting because I mean, outside of Deadpool, we don't have any characters that do that in the MCU, and so I really thought that the chemistry between her and Mark Ruffalo was good. I think that most of the humor landed for me pretty well, and I think. It did. I have complaints that it's a little clunky, but it did set up well that it feels like episode 2 is like case number 1, which is, I think like you, like, I mean, I was a fan of Law and Order growing up. Like I watched that with my mom as a kid, like courtroom procedural stuff. Love it. You know what I mean? Like it's, I used to read John Grisham books. Like I read a lot of his books. A lot of them.
That's cool.
I like lawyer stuff, and so I watched Matlock as a kid. This is hitting like an interest for me, and so I'm really excited to see Tatiana if that's how you say her name.
Tatiana Maslany,
yeah. And I'm excited to see how the cases proceed, and like you, I'm very excited for when Matt Murdock shows up, when Wanda shows up, when the Abomination shows up, all that. I mean, I'm very excited.
Right. I know a little bit more information than you, obviously, because I've seen episode 2 now. I woke up yesterday and I was like, oh shit, She-Hulk's out. And I was like, I guess I could watch this right now. So I ended up watching it yesterday. So I agree with all the things you just said. And the thing that I'm taking Daredevil out, because that's going to supersede all my wants and dreams of everything else. The thing that does excite me the most when I think about it is the idea of having a court procedural or just a longer court case, so to speak, and actually having that court lingo. And I don't know why, like A Few Good Men is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I don't know what it is about court drama. Yeah, I love it. I don't know why it is about court dramas, but I love that kind of stuff. I love the legal talk. I love all of that. I'm highly convinced that if I was in a court situation, I could probably represent myself. I've seen so much stuff, So like, I think about this all the time. I'm like, I could probably get away with it. I've seen so much, and I know quite a bit of the lingo. So I've point being, I've always enjoyed.
You're gonna be like Charlie. You're gonna be like Charlie from It's Always Sunny.
Yes.
Like when he's like, "No, sir, I'm an expert in bird law." Like that's and like you're gonna be just saying these buzzword lawyer terms that have no connection to reality.
Yeah.
That's what I'm imagining when you're saying that. Like that's what I'm imagining you, but kind of like
the judge is like, everyone rise, and I go sustained, like just like doesn't make any sense. Sidebar.
Keep saying sidebar.
Doesn't make any sense.
Can I have a sidebar to the sidebar?
Yeah, this got too complicated. Can we sidebar again? Yeah. No, but yes, I've always enjoyed that kind of stuff. So the prospect of seeing that within the MCU and also dealing with super powered people is really exciting. But this first episode really doesn't dive into that, right? It's the framework's pretty interesting in the fact that we start out with her telling the audience that she is the She-Hulk and that she is related to Bruce and all these other kind of things, which we've never heard about her in the MCU so far, right? And that Bruce has an extended family. He's always felt very isolated and like he's the only person in his universe, right? Besides the other MCU characters. So, which is always, it's kind of a little weird just because obviously he has family members, but it is kind of interesting that
is that comic accurate? She's his cousin in the comics?
Yes, it is his cousin, yeah. And so we're treated then basically to this flashback, and that's basically the whole episode, right? So they're on a trip together, and we've kind of been curious as to how Bruce has reverted back to his, or Hulk has reverted back to his Bruce Banner form, right? And so we got some interesting tidbits there about the device he has basically reverts him back, and his body can heal from the snap from Endgame better in his human form than his Hulk form, which is an interesting caveat. You would think the Hulk could heal better, but again, it's his science, right? So, or it's his movie science.
I mean, like at this point, MCU has its own version of like Star Trek technobabble. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where they it's
yeah, exactly. So we're seeing them on the trip, and there is always fun. When you're talking to an Avenger, there's always like the fanboy or fangirl part of it where they're asking questions that like audience members have been, us have been discussing for a long time, like Captain America, for example, and like his love life. So we're treated to the Sakaarian ship from Ragnarok or one of those, movies, and taking them out, and the blood from Bruce gets on to Tatiana and gives her powers. Which is, I think it's a little different in the comics. I believe that they get in a wreck and he does a blood transfusion to save her life, and it's like it's like a moral,
save her or make her the Hulk or she dies.
Exactly. And there's and I think there's even like some darker versions where he's like, I should have let you die. Like that no one deserves this kind of curse.
See, I kind of would prefer that a little bit because it did feel a little bit quick and just convenient, and then it was over and she's the Hulk now. And I think I guess like by the end of the show I might not give a fuck because like they did, like I said, they set us up to jump right into the Law episode 2. Is this a 6 or 8 episode series?
I think it's 8 because they're like 20 minutes long, not counting credits. They're short. They're really short.
Yeah. So Yeah, so like by the end of the day, I might not care, but you know, like that version is at least at face value more interesting to me,
Right.
because there's just more conflict. It becomes more, instead of it's like just a freak random accident, it was more of a conscious decision in order to like save someone's life. Like I think that, and I think I kind of like this idea of like then getting to play with like Bruce's guilt with that.
I agree.
I mean, I think there's that it just adds another interesting layer to him and her. So, but you know, like I said, by the end, I might not give a fuck because everything else is great.
Because
Thing,
Daredevil
like,
shows up.
They got us to the good part. Yeah, exactly.
All,
I mean,
all
like,
sins will be
if
forgiven
they-
when Daredevil shows up.
Right. If the question was, do we spend extra episodes on how she became the Hulk? Because you probably couldn't do that in one episode. That probably had to be more of a episode 1 and 2, like
Right.
longer ordeal to do it right. And so if the question is, well, we had to like not do that in order to like do more fun stuff later, might be worth it.
True, yeah, and I think you're right. There's a great conversation there of like even her saying you should have let me die because this is so awful. A conversation where he's like, or another conversation where he's like, I had a moment where I was almost let you die because I don't wish this on anybody, and you could also have killed other people. We didn't know what kind of Hulk you would become.
It's a much darker toned show to be,
It is.
and like that may be the main reason is that like that's a drama, that's a suspense, that sounds more like the Incredible Hulk, the Hulk's,
It does.
you know, the Edward Norton
It does.
movie, right? This dark, depressed, suicidal Bruce Banner, and like I think at the end of the day that is more interesting, and I do worry because I feel like we're getting less of that in the MCU, and I do feel like the MCU is becoming, you know, a little more it's not sunshine and rainbows necessarily, but like I guess it feels like we haven't gone quite as dark as recent as maybe the MCU has been in the past. But all that to say, I don't think that's necessarily a slight against She-Hulk, because
Yeah.
I mean I think if the best version of this show is this lighter toned thing, then this was probably the better decision.
Yeah, you know, and another thing too is they got it because of the format they chose with like a comedy sitcom kind of style, like runtime. It kind of forces you to condense a lot of information quickly, fast. And again, like we're getting into, most of this episode is boiled down to, which I was really surprised. It's really Hulk or Smart Hulk and her on the island, apparently that Tony helped pay for or whatever, and it's like it's been his retreat for 5 years during Endgame, or you know, between Endgame and Infinity War. And essentially it's where he developed the Smart Hulk and where he merged personalities and stuff like that. That feels good because that's one of the kind of complaints we had coming into Endgame or out of Endgame, was that was like a big thing that we saw off camera, and this helps like maybe that 5%. Like I still think we should have saw more.
Yeah.
But because Hulk's kind of got the shaft, you know, he's kind of less and less got the.
Yes.
You know, he's really has got the shaft since Incredible Hulk. Like
He's
Avengers,
a background character pretty much.
yeah, Avengers 1 was great. Like he was fantastic, and I liked him a lot in Age of Ultron. But
I did too.
you get, you know,
And
Infinity War.
I mean, I enjoyed him. Infinity War, at least, like he had an arc, at least, and then you thought the arc was
Kind
going to
of.
pay off in Endgame, but it didn't. He had the
Yeah,
beginning
exactly.
of an arc, half an arc.
Yeah, I mean, like, Hulk's in the first 5 minutes of Infinity War, and then, you know, in Smart Hulk, he does get to do the snap, but that's really all, and he does time travel, but he doesn't really get to do, it's not Hulk, you know, it's not the same thing. And I was kind of disappointed in our Ragnarok Hulk because it felt like he was a dumber or baby version of Hulk, and that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, most of this episode is built on montage in terms of him showing her all the things that he went through, and it's kind of like she basically does it better than him, right? Like she's already a smart version of herself. She does have anger issues, but it's more of like, it doesn't seem extrapolated by the Hulk part of it. It just seems like this is the thing she's dealing with as a person, and you know, she's getting irritated because he keeps poking and prodding her.
I mean, it feels like she has total control, right?
He does,
the Hulk doesn't have, or there doesn't seem to be a split personality as there is with Bruce.
Exactly. And I thought personally the CGI looked really good. I thought it looked I mean, for this is a TV show on a streaming service,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, I know they're trying to match the movies, and they have like largely done pretty good job at that. But
Sure.
also, like, we've heard so many stories about these VFX artists in the last month. I mean, more stories even this week on Two for One Joe.
Sure.
And it's kind of like, this is pretty damn good. I think it looks good. I don't know who could
Yeah.
complain about it personally for me.
No, I mean, I think we still haven't completely found a way to like eliminate the uncanny valley kind of thing
Yeah.
with this, and my like honestly, it may be a problem when we do, when we can perfectly replicate humans digitally that you can't tell the difference. That's when we're getting into like dystopian territory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that like I think I'm just so used to it because I mean, first Thanos, then we've got Luke Skywalker, like we've got Rocket and Groot. I mean, we've got so
Yeah.
many characters that are just pure CGI that like there are times when it, for a second it looks a little wonky or a facial expression happens a little too quick to, like it looks a little unnatural. But I think I'm just so used to it, it doesn't pull me out like it used to.
Yeah, I mean, there's concessions we make, especially with this genre of TV or movie,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
we know we're going to see a lot of visual effects because of the nature of the movies.
Yeah.
And so we go, if we went into a Christopher Nolan movie and we would be like, this is totally weird, but like,
Right, and it was the same thing of like 30 years ago when we were watching Star Trek in the 90s.
Right.
The visual effects were very basic and a lot of practical effects. But that's also a lot of what you were seeing in cinema at the time. We were still in the 90s mostly doing practical effects. Like
Yeah.
Star Wars, 1999 is really when that started becoming a bigger deal, or like more movies started adapting it after Star Wars. But like this is just, it's kind of the norm, is that like the TVs do at a lower budget of what you're seeing in the movies. But I think we're a lot closer today. Right. And
Yeah.
like, especially even, a show we're going to talk about next week, Sandman, I think, the kind of CGI and stuff and like that, like the gap is much smaller between what we see on the small screen versus the big screen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think another issue that she has going against her is the Hulk he's not as pretty as her. Like, he has more blemishes. She's
Sure.
a female, and so she has kind of like a stronger complexion, right? She's smoother, and that already lends yourself more to it looks more plasticky. If she had a beard on, she'd look
Yeah.
probably more realistic, but
Sure.
she does.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I hear you.
seriously,
That makes sense.
Bruce, if you
Yeah.
look at, he's got like freckles, and he's got like a little bit of stubble
Stubble
on his facial hair, and they can kind of get away with some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and so another thing too is here's kind of a thing that I've seen a lot on the internet, and I want your thoughts on, and we'll this won't be a super long episode or anything, but I do want to talk about, a lot of people are upset about they're saying that the Hulk has been nerfed, right? Like, we had the Incredible Hulk, we had Avengers Hulk, like we've seen memes where he is stopping this giant I can't think of the name, this giant alien, right, from Avengers 1 to not stopping a Jeep that she's driving in She-Hulk. There's the idea that she basically it's very the classic, we have a female protagonist, and they're telling the male that, hey, I say classic now, it feels more current, I'm a female, I'm angry all the time, you don't understand because you're a male, that whole thing. So what's your thoughts on this? And like, do you think that, I don't know, it's a tricky subject, of course, but I just want your general thoughts on it all.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. I mean, I've seen the people complaining about it and bitching about it. I think for one, I'm not bothered by it. I was not bothered by the scene. I think you're referring to specifically where he's talking about like how you need to control your anger, and like then she's like, I do it more than you do all the time. And I think it's a thing of like, I think obviously that line is in there as more of a nod to more of the reality that most women face compared to men. in real life as opposed to the show. And I guess, you know, to a degree, I guess I get, you know, if you're wanting to watch a show about a fantasy universe, it's maybe, especially if you are on the other side of the political aisle, maybe getting reminded of the other reality is annoying to you or some degree. I mean, like, I get that to an extent, but I also, I thought it was kind of funny for one. And I think, you know, obviously I agree with her about like what she says is applicable in the real world. I think there's also a point to saying that, like, you know, maybe Bruce's reaction could have been a little more tailored to his actual history a little bit. But like at the end of the day, we're watching people like in spandex and like superheroes and like all this kind of stuff. Like, you know, I think characters change what their, you know, abilities and all this kind of stuff all the time to fit the plot, to fit different moments or whatever. You know, it happens in the comics, it happens in the movies. This isn't really anything new at that level, I feel like. And so it's a thing of like, I get some annoyance. I would understand if you're like, hey, that kind of is annoying to me, that bothers me. Okay, fine. I don't think the outrage part is like, I just roll my eyes at I think.
Yeah. I don't know if there's I see a lot of articles or like memes or whatever. I'm not sure there's an outrage, but there's definitely people pointing it out and
sure,
whatever, you know, and I think I fall in the same area that you do. I think part of it, no matter what the art form is, typically the times and the culture and the generation around that time period seeps into the art, right? Like the conversation seeps into the world. Either it's a novel or a TV show or a movie or a painting. So I see that, you know. I do think that kind of like what you said, that, you know, it's a show, it's a universe that represents our reality sometimes, right? I mean, sometimes it's the MCU where it feels like this is not our universe we live in at all. And other times, sure. I feel like more so now than it did. I feel like it represented it more in the beginning than it does now. It was more grounded, realistic, you know, technology, you know, like it was more.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like they were making a conscious effort. I mean, like you think you look at like the first Iron Man movies,
right,
and like just even the amount of like court procedural stuff in that, like that all made things feel so
right.
You know, when he's going before the Supreme Court or these like the Senate, and like that stuff makes it feel like, oh yeah, this feels like our universe, but with a man with a robot suit. You know what I mean? And I think that is something that I think that was one of the things that first was, I think, kind of awesome about it, like that people really enjoyed, you know. And I think they were building off like Nolan's Batman movies that kind of started that trend, right? But the more that you get into the MCU plot, the less and less you can do that when you have Thanos and you have Kang and you know, you just have these things that can't mix with reality and anyone, you know, take it. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
No, you're right. You know, and I think, you know, it is interesting because it feels like every time we have, again, I could be wrong here, but a new female superhero or something, there's always some comment made. I feel like there's always something made, and it does kind of pull me out a little bit sometimes. You know, I'm kind of like, I don't know, is it always necessary to always put a bow on it? And I think that, especially in this context, for this one with She-Hulk, I'm like, if she was talking to, say, her friend or someone else, Bruce is a particular case where he's tried to commit suicide within the MCU because of his trauma and his anger issues. And it's like, Bruce does have issues, and he is an authority on something that's potentially dangerous to other people. So that kind of felt a little.
No, you're right. I think it did. It felt reductive of his history, and I will say, like, it's not necessary. I think what honestly would be even more cool is that you have like show don't tell me that kind of idea, right? Like that is a much more confident way to do this. And I do think I've mentioned this before, but I have no need to be lectured on social issues by Disney.
Exactly.
Right? The multi-billion-dollar company that wants nothing else other than to take everyone's money and have it all and control everything because they just want to be richer. So yes, the only reason these lines are in there is because they're hot and because, they will get other think pieces written about it. It's free advertising, right? And because Disney wants to be seen as a progressive social company. And okay, to one degree, just like with Miss Marvel, it's like, great. It is good that we're getting more representation. It's good that we're getting more strong female characters. It's good that we're getting more strong people of POC characters. That is great. But I'm also not gonna celebrate you because you're Disney. In theory, you should have been doing this like 20 years ago. But it's 2025, 2024, and like now you're finally at this point, and it's like I'm not going to praise you just because like you're only doing it now just because it's finally profitable to do it this way. And so it's just it's one of those things that like I get it. It is eye rolling because I want to see strong characters who embody those truths. I don't need them to preach it to me. And I don't think it's this thing of like I actually very much agree with it. Like I'm criticizing this as someone that agrees with the politics on display here.
That's the issue I
right?
kind of have with it. Yeah,
I agree with the politics of what they're trying to say. I think how they're saying it is ham-fisted and just again, I'm just like Disney, you shouldn't be trying to preach to people. It's just not, you have no place to talk kind of thing, right? And you're only doing this because it somewhere some financial like analyst decides that like, hey, we're actually going to make more money if we start talking this way and presenting these kinds of values. So
another interesting fact, or not fact, but another interesting part of this is some people are upset that she didn't have the trials and tribulation that the Hulk does, and she can do these things faster and better. And that he's jealous of her and all these other kind of things. I don't really have an issue with this because it's like here's the analogy. This might get too complicated, but a lot of people are upset because of Star Trek, of the reboot, and they're like, they erased my whole Star Trek timeline. I'm like, no, you got to understand, the prime timeline, the Kelvin timeline. You're like, you gotta understand, like the Kelvin timeline doesn't happen without the other OG timeline. Like it's because Spock from the OG goes back in time and he's in this universe and he's changing things. Same thing here. Like she doesn't get to a place where she can do this kind of stuff without all the work that Bruce does. Because it's because of his smart Hulk blood that allows her to, at least we think, I could be extrapolating this, it feels like because he did the work, because he went through all this hard stuff, that she doesn't have to so much. And that's kind of also a story of generation and legacy. Like our parents do stuff, and hopefully the idea is that the next generation doesn't have to endure so much hardship, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when it's even like the idea of like, I don't know, like in so many ways, like if the Hulk is like, at some degree, he's just his condition relates to real life like mental health issues, right? Like split personality disorder or something like that.
Yeah.
And those can come from trauma and these traumatic events. And I will say, like, Hulk's background story, how he becomes the Hulk, is a lot more like traumatic than hers version. Her version is much more like it's over pretty quick. No one's trying to kill you or murder you. Like, you know what I mean? There's no big explosion. You don't like lose, like, it's not this big dramatic ordeal. And so I feel like I don't know. That doesn't bother me at all. Also, just because like, that other version of her backstory, like the one where he does it to save her life, that's probably the version where that's the story, right? Like that's probably the setup you do for the version of her story where it really mirrors Bruce's story.
Yeah.
But I think it's great, for one, to do something different. I don't need to just see Bruce's story again with a girl, right? Like I'd rather see a different version of a like character or with a different like all just experiences. And yeah, I guess to me it's like, well, if mental health disorders, like if you have schizophrenia and this other person has schizophrenia, they can look completely different
Sure.
right? Like how they portray. So like
Yeah.
it makes sense to me that like, hey, yeah, I mean like she's his cousin, but she has somewhat different maybe she just has better genetics, and because of that, it was an easier process or something. I don't know.
It kind of
I don't
implies
need
almost
to-
that they might be mutants. Also, that Bruce might have a mutant gene because of his family lineage. There's some. I mean, it kind of implies. He said something about her DNA, almost like he shares her DNA, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it feels like there might be like a mutant connection here. Personally,
Yeah, maybe. The Hulk isn't a mutant in the comics, is he?
no, not at all, not at all. I mean, like it's like splitting hairs. Like, what's a
Right,
I mean, it really is like. It's argued that Spider-Man's a mutant because he has radioactive spider DNA and radioactive DNA in his body, which is like a mutation.
But isn't mutants like it's like a born mutation? It's not.
Yeah,
something that happens
that's
to you?
kind of the differentiating factors, that they're born with a mutation. But again, we're all literally born with mutations. Like as
they're
humans,
just super powered mutations.
in relation to each other, we're all born with mutations. So like anyway, that's again, you're splitting hairs. It's whatever you decide in the moment.
Yeah.
So I think that another thing too is people like talked about, to kind of add on to this, is that like it's like a Rey Skywalker situation, kind of where she's coming in and she doesn't, she's already good with the Force, she's already good with these kind of things, blah blah blah. And I also argue that like this is a little different because he's Smart Hulk is weaker than regular Hulk in my opinion. Like he doesn't have it's like someone who's hungry to work out and lose weight. They have more passion and energy than someone who's on the couch because they don't have to do it anymore. That's one thing. The other thing is he's still stronger than her. Like, I don't know, people don't see that in the thing. Like, he can stop the Jeep.
That boulder like into space or whatever.
Yeah, he can stop that Jeep, but he doesn't want to hurt her. Like, and that's my opinion. And it's also comedy. It's a different genre.
Well,
I mean, it's
a different story, right? Like Rey Skywalker, what is her story? She's finding out who she is and to become a Jedi. Like that's the like nutshell purpose of the Star Wars sequels trilogy for Rey, at least. That is not the purpose of this show. The show is not about how Jennifer Walters becomes She-Hulk. That happened in episode 1. What this show is about is a super-powered lawyer and the shenanigans and situations that come about because of those things intersecting. That's this show. I don't need. That's what I'm saying in before is like, that was Bruce's story. Bruce's story is about this man who has to come to terms with this other part of him and this disease, this mutation, whatever, and learns how to combine them into one thing. I don't want that again. I want something new, and this new thing is about a lawyer that is also a Hulk, and like that's the hook, that's the point of the show, and so to me the comparison doesn't work at all. You know what I mean? Like you're literally saying like, well that character's goal is to become a Jedi, and then she has no issues becoming that. Well, you're right. Jennifer Walters' goal is not to become the Hulk; it's to be a good lawyer, and that's what we're about to see happen. Like. The Hulk is the like complications that is her challenge in becoming in being a lawyer. Like the Hulk is going to be, I feel like, the roadblock into her wanting to be this lawyer that she wants to be and learning how to deal with that.
I think you're right. And I think another thing too is based on the way the framework of the show in terms of the things we were told in episode 1, I think she will come to a place and say like, hey, you were right. I don't have all this figured out. I think that will happen by the end of the season. So I think that's something that they set that up. That they spent a lot of time on it in episode 1. That she has all this figured out. At least she thinks she does, and he's trying to tell her you don't, which is like the classic. That's kind of a hero's journey. It's someone they don't have it all figured out. Exactly. So I think we'll feel better by the end of the season. We have a lot to look forward to. We have Wong, Abomination. We have Daredevil. There's a lot of we have 9 episodes, by the way, so we have 8 more to go.
Oh, hell yeah.
And they're shorter too, so it kind of matches back down to like the 6 episode total runtime we've been getting. But I will say this: I've seen episode 2, and it's really fun. And there's a lot of cool Easter eggs and a lot of cool things that like I've been thinking about for 10 years that they talk about.
Oh, cool.
And there's things that it really, in my opinion, I was convinced. You could have told me 3 months ago, like they won't do this movie, but now I'm like, oh, I think it's going to happen now. This other movie we haven't talked about yet, and I'm like, okay, that's probably going to happen, and it opens up a lot of possibilities and doors. There's even some like canon breaking stuff that I think they kind of broke canon a little bit, and timeline wise, I think that's
Okay.
I think they messed up a little bit, which I don't like.
It's not the first time.
It's not the first time. This one's pretty
They
egregious.
literally did it
but
with Spider-Man. So like
they really did in a bad way.
like,
This one is
and
this
it
one's
was like
not as
so fixable. They could re-release the movie and just change the text.
easily.
Like,
yeah,
isn't that
easily.
that's the easiest fix in the world? And like, I
It
don't
is.
get it.
It really is. This one's not as egregious as that, but it also feels so close together to another property that you're kind of like, how'd you not catch that? Like, I
Interesting.
feel like
Okay.
they set this up last year, and they already messed it up. So anyway, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. Anyway, last thing I want to say before we get off here is Captain America fucks, and love that. Of course he did, you fools. You can't beat Thanos unless you fuck. So I don't know why people ever thought
I mean,
he couldn't.
let's
Or didn't.
let's just remember that like he literally flirts with Natalie Dormer in of Game of Thrones, right? Like that is who we
Yes.
see him. You what, you don't think he's gonna like, you know, with that? Yeah, of course he is. So like, I mean, come on, like that. It's a little bit of a dumb question, to be honest.
There's
because it's like
also-
the answer is obvious, but anyway.
Oh yeah, he fondue. I mean, he as Howard Stark says, he had some fondue. So I mean, the thing. Also, there's a cool thing there too. The same actress who plays Star Lord's mom in Guardians 1 and 2.
I saw that. Yeah.
So it's like maybe Peter and Cap are related.
Yeah, like it's his grandmother or something.
It's his grandmother. Yeah. I mean, he's got that super soldier DNA. He could pop out a kid looks exactly like the
Does
same one as
Cap
the mom.
have
You know,
kids in the comics? Like have kids?
he does, and
Do they
of
have?
course,
they
there's been
inherit his
articles.
powers?
Yeah, in a way. Yeah, there's some speculation already because of this Captain America Fox thing that like he had a kid, she had a kid, and there it gets dark actually. So, but I don't know if they'll go that route. I kind of hope they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need every. I'm actually not a huge fan of passing the torch and kids superheroes. I
Sure.
don't like that kind of shit. Never have. There's only
We've already
few
passed
times
the Captain America torch.
Exactly. We've already had a few of the cases where it works really well but whatever. But in this case particularly, like She-Hulk is, I don't know. She's been around so long. I don't feel like it doesn't feel. It feels like it.
Yeah.
I grew up with She-Hulk, so I'm like, oh yeah, she's a thing. Someone like Ironheart, I have a harder time with because she's such a new addition to the comics.
Sure.
I think her sales were abysmal. Like no one liked the comic, and they still want to do it. I don't know why, but I mean I know why. I feel like it is Disney being like, hey, we have a black female character who could be Iron Man. I'm like, that's fine, but you also have a black male character who could be Iron Man. It's called War Machine. Like,
Sure.
and no one liked this character. I mean, she may be fantastic, but
Sure.
that feels a little corporate bendy there to me.
Yeah, I get it.
Just a little bit. Anyway, how can our listeners write into us, Daniel?
Listeners, write into us at bit.ly/241mail. Let us know what you thought of episode 1 of She-Hulk. Was it amazing? Was it not amazing? Let us know. bit.ly/241mail.
And if you can't hit us up at our Bitly, you can always hit us up in the comment section below, because typically we do go live on these podcasts, youtube.com/J41Studios. Again, subscribe, hit that notification bell. That way you can figure out all the cool things that are happening, and it really helps people find the channel, and it really supports us, and we hope to keep doing this. We've done 130 episodes over almost 3 years. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time.
Just
a lot
of
pods.
this pod. And that's not even like counting all the other episodes of just content.
Yeah, we have over 210 episodes of videos
Some
on
days
the...
we're gonna get someone owes us big for all this work. You know what I'm
They
saying?
really
I don't know
do.
who to give the invoice to yet, but once I figure out who needs this invoice, oh my god.
I haven't received a single penny from this show, and you haven't either. We're like,
No.
we're two Craig Masons.
We're probably like just like $100, $200, $300 in debt just from the tiny expenses to the of investment into it.
More than
per
that,
person.
dude. More than that. Oh yeah, it's
right, yeah.
I know it's more than that, but no, it's but hey, that's why we do it. We do it not because of the money, we do it because of the fame and glory. So
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, I look forward to talking to you about Sandman next week, and then I think we're doing a two-parter on that one, breaking the first season down into two halves, and then as well as coming back for She-Hulk. We have Andor around the corner. We have a lot of, I think superhero-wise, we're kind of winding down. I think we have Black Adam this year and Black Panther, and Aquaman got pushed back to December of 2023. It just happened day before yesterday. So a whole year out.
Who knows if any of these DC movies are ever coming out? I am not convinced that any of them are going to come out at this point.
They pushed it a year back, and it's like, you understand that Aquaman 1 came out 5 years ago. Aquaman 1 came out 5 years ago from that release, 5 years ago. And then Shazam is pushed to March. So it's kind of like, man, I don't know. DC don't give a fuck about waiting.
There's a very interesting shit show happening over at Warner Brothers right now. Warner Brothers Discovery.
I bet Discovery was kind of like, this is not what we signed up for. But maybe it was. Maybe they had a plan going in. Anyway, my name is Donovan Thompson.
I am Daniel Wingfield.
And we have spoken.